I'm Wil Gritten. I'm the author of Letting Go. I was born in North Wales and raised in the Croeso Valley with good old-fashioned hippie parents. I've been writing ever since I can remember. Mostly it was kind of a rebellion against against my teachers at school, who didn't think I was, I'd amount to very much. And mostly that was because I didn't really respect them very much, so that I wrote these elaborate stories as a kind of a fuck you to them. And then later on, as I traveled and moved around a lot, I think I wrote because it became a kind of a necessity to write. A kind of therapy. And then there came a point in my life when I didn't know what to do anymore. I kind of ground to a halt, and that was after I'd spent 8 months in South America, which is what the book's about. And my dad asked me what I was going to do next, and I said to him that I didn't know, and he offered to put me up for 6 months back home in Wales, where I hadn't lived since I was 16, and put me up and bed and board me so that I could write a book. And I thought it was a preposterous idea, and then ended up stumbling into this idea that writing full time was actually something deeply pleasing. And it took me a long time to train myself to sit down every day and write. And I felt like there was this door in my stomach which was really stubborn and rusted shut. And I had to use it every day so that it would kind of oil itself, so this stuff could come out of me easier and easier. And as time went on, the door became easier to open, and I'd sit down and in 3-4 hours have it open, and then I'd manage to wrestle it close again and could be exhausted afterwards. And that's how I wrote this book. It was a struggle. Nowadays it's easier. I don't write quite so personally anymore, I guess. And the doors only open a little bit. I don't write as personally anymore, or at the moment, because writing your second book is an incredibly daunting prospect. And I spent 4 months trying to come up with a really serious idea that would say everything that I wanted to say. And I started about 7 books that were really serious, and then realized that none of them were going to work at all. So I decided to write a book about schoolgirl zombies, which only allows me to open the door in my guts up an inch. And that gives plenty of energy out to write this kind of scary, fun journey. And I think Letting Go is kind of naive in a sense, in that I wrestled the door as wide open as I could and flowed out as much of the real emotion that I felt when I was writing it and when I was living it. You know, those times in South America after weeks on you know, in high altitude, on large amounts of uppers and downers, and the kind of horror and that freedom that you get when you're traveling, which allows you to be terrible. And then I relived all that in the privacy of my own little farm in Wales. I think that the reason why I write, as opposed to, you know, any average Joe out there with a surfboard on Bondi Beach, it could sound arrogant, but I write because I feel like I have to write. Because if I didn't write, be like a blocked pipe which would kind of eventually explode, and I am like that. If I don't get this out, I'm horrible to be around. I'm a tyrant. And in order for an easy life, I have to have the balance of hard work and hard play, and then this stuff which is formed around it afterwards, which has to come out. Otherwise, yeah, that'd be bloody awful. What I tried to do is really tell the truth about traveling, about how I felt while I was traveling. Instead of, there's a propensity to come home from your travels and tell these elaborate stories which are complete, they're falsifications of what really happened, because you feel that you ought to come home bearing the heads of the animals that you slain, telling these amazing stories of your bravery and stuff like that, whereas actually you spend most of the time shitting yourself and having a terrible time. You've been bitten by several hundred different horrible things, and you smell, and you haven't slept right for a week, and there's this kind of thing that you drag around with you that you don't remember when you get home. That all of your travel memories are kind of these brilliant, Flash Gordon adventures, whereas in reality you've spent most of your time being miserable, and I think that's what kind of I didn't set out to write like that. I think that's just what happened. Is I sat down and I started rerunning it all in my head, and realized that I wasn't as much of a hero as I thought I had been, or that it wasn't as much fun as I thought it was. But then when I did have fun, it was incredibly good fun, and that probably that infected everything else, and made the bits that weren't quite so much fun, the majority, kind of disappear into the background. When you're traveling, you have this other idea, which is quite the same as the other. I think when you're traveling, you have this, or before you go, you have this idea that you're going to be in kind of some exotic wilderness all alone. But in reality, you get there, and the majority of the time, unless you really work hard at it, you're surrounded constantly by all these other people who are also looking for this kind of genuine experience by themselves as well. And I think that's another theme of the book, is to spend to the sense of kind of disillusionment I felt in turning up to these places where in my head they were incredibly exotic, but in reality they were actually teeming with lots of other white middle class people just like me. I think I said we are many, we privileged few. And I think a lot of the time I spent kind of trying to make friends with natives so that I could escape. And it's about that strange difficulty you have in finding what it is you're looking for when you're traveling. That thing where you have to just relax and not be scared, and good things come to you. And how difficult that is, and how much time you spend kind of doing things because you're worried that you have to keep moving, and you have to find something. And I suppose that's true for the rest of your life as well. That if you do just let go and relax, then the right things come along.